the RecyclerView type actually uses an adapter to actually feed it with data. But what is RecyclerView? So RecyclerView is basically a component that is used in Android to display lists of stuff that are the same. And it can display an infinite list. So if you have your emails and you're like me and you never delete any emails, you've got thousands upon thousands of emails. You could implement a scrolling list by creating a view for every email. That will, if you have 1,000 emails in your inbox, that will break. You will use a shitload of memory and it will be very slow to start your application. And why do you need to create 1,000 views when there's only 6 available for viewing? You don't want that. So instead, what you want to have is a thing that basically uses, in this case, even reuses views to display items. So RecyclerView allows you, if a view is not visible, it wouldn't be visible, it won't even exist. But it will allow you to, or it will keep a cache of a few views around so that you can just, rather than creating a new view with the data, you will actually create a new view that will store this, you can be reusing a view, because inflating a view is a little bit expensive, and if you're scrolling very fast through a list, that might actually be visible. In regular use it's not that visible, but they want scrolling to be really nice and snappy as well. It is a better design. And so it supports an infinite amount of items because, well, if it's not visible, it doesn't care about it. Infinite is not correct. It supports the maximum amount of an integer, so that's about 2 billion items, because it has a size property that has maximum value. Or it could be a long even, so in that case it's, well, to the power 63, a lot. If you have that many items, you've got another problem. Many other things will break. So anyway, so we create the views on demand and it reuses them. How do you get these views? Well, we have an adapter for that, because RecyclerView is a generic component. It wants to allow you to display these items, but it doesn't want to force you to know what they should look like. People want to make their own way of making it look. That's what RecyclerView does. So it replaces this list view class that does basically the same thing, not as nicely. RecyclerView actually does animation properly. So if you add an item, it will actually animate the growing. If you provide, by default, it has a default animator. And you can define your own animations as well if you want to. Or if you remove an item, it can be animated automatically. There is a bit, so it's slightly more programming than list view because it is a little bit more opinionated, but it provides a lot of functionality for free, and it also provides a good way of doing this, including something called a view holder. Come back to that. So yes, there's a guide there, and I would suggest you, if you do this, for example, for a high score view or something like that, if you want to do that for your assignment, RecyclerView is a good thing to look at. So it's part of the Jetpack, but so you need to add it to your project to make it work. Although Android Studio might be able to do this automatically for you. Obviously, pick the version that you need in particular, and use the Android X version. This is a slightly old slide that uses. So we would use version 29 in principle, but 29 no longer has the COM Android support library. It uses Android X Jetpack. So use Android X RecyclerView, and then we don't need the V7 either. That's all gone. Use the modern RecyclerView library. So then, so it has pluggable behavior. So you provide an adapter to make it able to get at your data. You can have your own layout manager. So RecyclerView does also replace GridView. The grid view is if you have images in a grid, so you have more than horizontal and vertical. RecyclerView also works horizontally, not only vertically, etc. There's different ways that it can work and different things you can do. You have a layout manager that does this, so most of the code is shared, and the layout manager determines what it looks like. And you can write your own one if you really want to, and an item animator provides animation. Getting back to the simple usage of RecyclerView, you basically need to create an adapter. And important there is that there is this generic parameter VH, which is a view holder. And the idea is that a view holder is an object that holds a view, but also can have methods and properties. So you say, set this data to the view holder, and you just make it work. So a view holder is just that holds your view, and maybe some other things state that you want to add to this. In particular, you don't really want for every time you have a view do the find view by ID bit, etc., to get the contained views, etc., etc. Instead, you want a view holder, and then you can just set a property on the view holder. It also works really well with data binding, by the way. And then you have these three functions: get item count, that tells the view holder how many items there are to display in that list. And yes, if you make the list bigger, you can increase this, but you need to notify or call a function on the adapter to tell it that the data has changed. So you call notify, one of the notify method variants. Because RecyclerView has different methods of being informed of that the data changed, so that it can do different animations depending on how it changed. And there is a utility that you can use if you don't know how some data changed, then you can use the utility to determine the changes. So yes, and a view holder allows you to store some information about the views, or create a get setter method that you just pass data and then it updates all the bits. And you can make it quite elegant, and it's normally an inner class of the adapter, or at least not an inner class, a class that's defined inside the adapter. It's not mandatory, but common. So how do we create a view holder? So when we create onCreate view holder gives you two parameters. That is the parent and the view type. The view type, by default, it will just be 0. But if you have different types of views, you could override the getViewType method with the and that will with the index of the item that needs to be it wants to know what type it is, and then it will pass that along. So a view holder is something that holds a view, but there's no data attached to it yet. So this will just create your view holder. So you inflate your view, you then create the view holder with that view, and do this. So you call a layout use a layout inflator to store this. You can get you might want to store that layout inflator in your adapter because you're reusing it all the time. And then we inflate that layout inflator. We inflate the layout with the parent. So it uses the parent to get the theming information. So what is the and for inheriting properties and styles and stuff like that. And then we pass it the false argument to say we don't want to attach it to the parent, because the attaching of the view holder to the parent is being done by the RecyclerView. This is in the documentation, but you must remember this. If you do this incorrectly, things will maybe work in funny ways. At the best, you get some flicker and make things slower. But you shouldn't attach it. So then the view holder, yes, can record stuff for your convenience. And so if you have a particular view that gets the username, you might have a username view and a message view or whatever you want. And you can record those, and then when you set stuff, you don't need to use find view by ID to get those. And this is a view that is, this view holder holds the view that is used for different things. A view holder also has a few extra properties that are helpful, so it knows what the current item is that is being displayed on, etc. So when we have the other one is on-bind view holder. So what on-bind view holder does is it takes a view holder and tells you, okay, now you need to update this view holder to make it display whatever needs to be displayed for the item at this particular position. So what you need to do is implement it, set the values, and make sure that also no old values from the previous item are visible. You make sure that you set all the properties that need to be changed. You say, oh, if it's not visible, okay, set it to a null value, etc. And one of the things when we look back at data binding, if you have your view holder, you might just have it store your data binding, and when you set the item, you get that item. Oh, which the item in that position? Okay, is this user? And then you take the binding and you say set user, and then it just updates automatically. So your view holder and your binding are almost the same thing at that point. That's something you want to do with adapters. Then view holders have some other, the recycler views have some other capabilities. There is a related library that allows for selection. If you want to allow selecting items, you can do it by hand, but there's also this selection library that allows you to do this. And a very cool one that I mentioned or I hinted at briefly before is this divutil. Basically, if you have a list of 2 items and you want to know what's different on the list, divutil will actually help you calculate this and invoke the notifications in the adapter. So the adapter will actually be able to make the right changes or approach the right changes. Of course, if you just add an item and you know you add an item, it's better just to call notify add item immediately, because that means you don't need to calculate and go through every item and compare them and do equality checks. Say this change, this change, this change, because that's what divutil does. It uses a good fast algorithm for it, but obviously is not as fast as it would be if you had the item itself. So if you know what changed, so you can do that directly. So, and as most of the time when you change the list, you know what you're changing. Oh, I'm adding this, I'm adding that. But if you get something from a database, you might not. Those are the kind of cases that